In this section, we will talk about recursive functions. A recursive function is a function that calls itself during its execution. We use them typically with recursively defined data structures, such as lists. Let's start with an example. We created a new identifier x. Then we created a new definition of x identifier in which we also used x. And this x refers to the previous definition, so it equals 11. And the result is therefore 15. So when you write down the definition using the let keyword, then the expression is always evaluated in the environment which you had before this let definition, just like in our example. In other words, when you use an expression in the let binding, this expression is always evaluated in the old environment. In the case of the functions, the same principle applies. Let's take a look. As you can see, we have two definitions of the function func. The second definition is calling the func inside its body, and this definition refers to the first definition of the func. So, when we call the function, we are calling its latest definition, which is the second one. And inside its body, we are calling the first version of the func, since it's the one that existed when the second version was defined. And the result of our function is 5, since it's 1 plus 4. However, what if we wanted to create a recursive function? Let's try to define a factorial recursive function. As you can see, we got an error, since the factorial function which we have in the body of the function refers to a factorial which has to be defined before, but it doesn't exist. So we get an error message since the factorial didn't exist before. So this is not working because with a recursive function, the function used in the body refers to the function which we are currently defining, and not to something which has been defined before. And this is the reason why we need to use a new rec keyword, which enables us to write recursive functions. It allows us to refer to the function which we are currently defining. With this in mind, let's write factorial recursive function again, this time using rec keyword. This time we got no error, since when we write the function using the rec keyword, then it is considered to be recursive. So let's run it and get factorial of 10. It works. We get our factorial of 10. Now, let's talk about mutually recursive functions. Mutually recursive functions are when you define several functions by recursion which can call each other during execution. Let's define two mutually recursive functions, isEven and isOdd. IsEven function should return true if the passed integer is even, and isOdd function should return true if the integer is odd. So let's run our code. And when we run our code, we got an error, since if we try to define two functions without simultaneous definitions, it can't work, since isEven function used isOdd function inside its body before it was defined. Let's create these two functions simultaneously then. You can see it works, because if we pass both definitions at the same time, joined with the keyword AND, then both definitions are accepted. So the definition of the isEven function recurses on the isOdd function, and the definition of the isOdd function recurses on the isEven function. This means they are both mutually recursive functions. So let's run them. We passed 3 to the isEven function and got false, and then we passed 22 to the isEven function and got true.